Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author, coach, and founder of the Family Enrichment Academy, Jim White. He has been married for 40 years and has 6 children, as well as 12 grandchildren. His background as a family enrichment coach, along with his life experience, provide a unique perspective on parenthood. His book, How to Be the Parent Your Teenager Needs You to Be, is his second book on parenting. The mission of the Family Enrichment Academy is to share 40 years of lessons and hard-earned wisdom, to empower parents to be the hero within their families, to teach the principles, values, and beliefs that will lead to a life and family full of peace, joy, and love. Enjoy this interview.
Well, hey, Jim, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out to the program today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Me too. So before we get into your life and your work and what has made you who you are, we've gone through quite a thing the last 3 years with COVID. The pandemic's worked on all of us in its own specific way. And I'm curious how you survived that time period now that things are waking up and how it's changed the way that you both approach life and conduct business now.
That's a great question because, it's affected all of us, obviously, and it still is, or still feels like it is. And the primary shift for me is that most of my work happens from home, and which is, it's kind of nice. There's some pros and cons to that. For me, it feels like it's a complete pro, but my kids are kind of grown and gone at this point. I know for some other people, and I obviously do a lot of work with families, if they have smaller or younger kids at home, working from home can be a challenge. So, but that's, probably one of the biggest changes for me. And, as it relates to the work I do with families and teenagers, it's really affected them from more of a standpoint of, the way the schools work and the way they connect with other kids. There's been some disruption obviously around that, and it feels like with my kids they're starting to get back into more face to face and being with each other again, but it took quite a while. It was there was a couple year period where it felt like they were pretty disconnected, which is hard on them. It's stressful for the kids to go through that, and I think we experienced that as parents and adults as well. So it's nice to be able to go to a little league baseball game now, and just all that stuff is kind of being back on, if you will.
So I'm going to kind of boil down exactly what you do for a living. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day, and one of the kids looks up and asks you, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
What I would tell them is that I help parents in the adult world, we call it coaching, but I help parents that are looking to do a better job of the parenting their children, and knowing what to do when there's a problem with one of their kids. And my focus is on teenagers. I work with the older kids, the preteens and the teenagers, and even up into those college years. But it's just a matter of supporting parents, giving them new strategies. It's just a different time, and it's a different kind of parenting that happens when your child moves into those teen years. And sometimes parents struggle with making that transition and knowing what to do. And so part of my job is to help them identify, new strategies and new ways to approach issues and problems, and to new ways just to communicate and connect with their children that are now teenagers.
So when you were in the third grade, what did you want to do when you grew up?
Probably at third grade, I was anticipating being an NFL football player, but that didn't get very far. But you know how it is when you're a kid.
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to your childhood, and I want to know, what were some of the seeds that were planted in you that become who you are to help other people?
It's funny. It feels like I've always had this interest in personal development. I think that's where it starts. It's just the whole idea of personal development. And I mentioned, I always, pictured myself being a professional athlete, and it really started around athletics. How do you become a better athlete? And the interesting thing is, for me, even, in junior high and high school, for whatever reason, I started to be interested in the mental aspects of playing sports. And one of the reasons was I one of the sports I played was golf. And if you've ever played golf, you understand there's a mental aspect to it, and being able to manage your mindset and your thought patterns just can have a huge impact on how you perform. And so I started down that path really through sports, and a lot of it through golf. And then as I moved into my 20s, it just continued on into, work and family and parenting. I just found myself really being intrigued and interested in personal development. And, as my family grew, then it was the opportunity not just for myself, but then how do I engage with my kids? And, just the whole idea of coaching came into play. But it started for me, it was that personal development and the mental aspects of playing sports. That's really what got me down this path, I think.
So speaking of sports and things that motivate you, who would you consider a role model or a hero for you in your life?
So, obviously a lot of times people point to their parents, and that, is certainly the case for me, both my father and my mother. But, as I then think about, as I kind of evolved into, pursuing this at a higher level, there's certain like authors and teachers, guys like Tony Robbins and Wayne Dwyer, and those, guys were inspirational to me. And I read a lot, and reading what they write, it has an impact. So it's guys like that. And today, you might be familiar with like Simon Sinek and some of those types, of Brandon Bouchard. These are guys that work in the personal development area, and they have a big impact on me. And I love reading and engaging with their work.
So let me ask you this, and you may have already answered it, but if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would it be?
Who would it be? It's got to just be one, huh? I have different areas. Like in the personal development area, it would be somebody like a Tony Robbins, would be, kind of fascinating, or somebody like an Oprah Winfrey, somebody that's accomplished a lot. But then, as I mentioned, I have a lot of sports interest as well, and actually a lot in the golf arena. To meet somebody like Jack Nicklaus and hear some of the stories would be really fascinating. Or Lee Trevino, he's a great storyteller, and those are guys that were in their prime when I was, younger and really getting into the game of golf, for example. So it's kind of so I'd have sort of two sides to that, if that's allowed.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, every day we get up and we have things that we want to do and accomplish. We have a motivation behind all of that. What's your chief motivator? What gets you up and going and wanting to accomplish in your life?
Yeah, it's what you're kind of going for is the why. Why do we do what we do? And, for me, and this is really fundamental to my practice as well. So let me just speak on that for a minute. I have really two core fundamental beliefs that I try to build into the work that I'm doing. And the first one is that all of us deserve to be seen for who we are and loved unconditionally. So that's the first sort of principle or value, if you will. And the second one is that we all deserve to be surrounded by people that lift us up and empower us to be our absolute best. And to me, the family is the most natural place for that to happen. And so what gets me up and sort of my why to do this work, it starts with my own family. I want my own family to have that experience, to have that experience of being in an environment like that. And not just myself now. I have children, but they're grown children. Now I have grandchildren. And, part of, if you want that emotional component, the idea of me, 10 years from now, sitting down with one of my grandchildren that hasn't even been born yet, and having them read a book that I've written and have a conversation about it, and it's all being around, that love-centered family and empowerment and being the best you can be, or being lifted up. That's what motivates me to do this work, is it's almost like a legacy kind of a thing. It's putting that out there. But then, obviously it extends well beyond my family as well. Extended family, the community, the country. You start to just reach out and how can I impact people and have that be what they experience within their families. That's the ultimate goal.
So how do you get to the end of that set day and quantify or qualify it as a good day?
I think if I touch somebody and had an impact on even if it's just one person, I mean, if each day I was able to have an impact and maybe shift a mindset or have them experience some hope, that things can get better and give them a strategy that helps them to move them forward. I think that makes it a good day. It's like, if you do speaking, I heard something once about when you go and which I do some public speaking or workshops, that sort of thing. And the premise is, the event's over and a person comes up to the person that's speaking and says, "Man, I just loved hearing your talk." And the idea was, well, you must be the person I came here today to speak to. And it just has to be that one person. So, having that and whether it's through, this conversation, who knows, this conversation may end up touching somebody when you eventually air it and publish it. And so that makes that a good day.
Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could dispense advice on that version of you based on the wisdom that you've gained, the things that you've done, overcome, successes, failures. What would you tell your young version?
Probably to start what I'm doing now sooner. It's more of a belief pattern. I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I feel very called to do this work that I'm doing, but I was feeling that nudge and that calling quite a while ago. And I think if I just wasn't, I don't know, maybe I wasn't quite ready, but I think I could have stepped into it or leaned into it sooner. So it would be that idea of, trust that intuition a little bit and be courageous to lean into this purposeful work earlier rather than later. Don't wait, in other words.
So, I have a couple of teenagers at home, and I'm curious, and my day job, I work as an IT technician in a large school district, so I'm around a whole swath of young people every day. And I'm curious in what you do and what you see, especially coming out of this pandemic, what's been kind of a common thread with who you're trying to help that maybe they don't see, but that can be unraveled and that can help them, find comfort and get to where they want to be?
So I'll answer that two ways. One is the symptom or what we're seeing more and more of. And if you're in school systems, you may see this as well. But I find a lot of my work with parents is around the topic of anxiety or stress with their teenagers. It feels like there's been an explosion of anxiety. And the pandemic certainly accelerated that or exaggerated that sense of anxiety. And the pandemic's impact was primarily around the teens and really all of us feeling disconnected. There was this sense of isolation. We didn't have that community that we were used to. The teenagers used to going to school and sitting in the lunchroom with all their friends, and now, they went through that period where they didn't do that. Actually, my youngest child was a senior in March of 2020 when everything shut down. She lost her spring break, she lost her prom, she lost her graduation. All that stuff didn't happen. And it was a disconnect. And, that brought on that anxiety. So that's what I notice as a theme that's fairly common with parents with teenagers is that they're experiencing some stress or anxiety. And one thing that I would point to that's a common sort of remedy for that and a strategy to work against that is just to become very intentional about building connection. Because like I said, I think a lot of it is the result of the teenager feeling isolated or not disconnected or not good enough. But if that parent can do a really good job of building connection and being very intentional about how they build connection with the teenager, it's like you're putting up a line of defense against that anxiety and stress that they may experience. So, that's the place I would point them is to work on the skills and the strategies for building connection.
So of all of the things that you've done and accomplished in your life up to this point, what are you the proudest of?
Probably, it'll be twofold, and it's in the same general area. One is my marriage. and my family. So those are the two things. My wife and I, we celebrate, will it be this year? Our 41st wedding anniversary this year. So we've been together for a long, long time, and we've had our share of ups and downs, but right now it's as good as it's ever been. And so that's, I feel like that's an accomplishment. And then through that process, we have had and raised 6 children. And just to have them, off onto their adult life and doing what they're doing, and all of them being in a pretty good place. And one of my wife's favorite sayings is that you're only as happy as your least happy child. But right now, most of our kids feel like they're in a pretty good place. And so, there is a sense of pride in that, just that family, if you will, and what we've done over the last 40-some years.
So in all of the work that you've done, the help that you've given clients, what's been one of the best success stories? What's the one that really stands out in your mind?
Yeah, it's, taking, like I've worked with a situation where it's a broken family. So it's a divorce has happened. And I was working with the father, so it's like he's the dad, but he's kind of only a part-time dad, and it's a tough situation. The kids are with mom half the time, and with him, and he's remarried, so there's a stepmom, and it's just the dynamic of that whole thing is a little bit of a challenge, and to be able to work with him and help him. I like to use this idea and analogy of being the hero within your family and being the one that's taking a stand for love, for example, and, being able to work with him and have him be that. So it's not, poor, pitiful me and, being a victim of the circumstances. How can I step in and lead in this scenario and have us all engage with love and make the family work better all the way around? And we've had, that was one where, that particular dynamic, it just pops in my head. That particular dynamic was a challenge, but it's been really cool to kind of watch him lean into that and have an impact. It's not only impacted the kids, it's impacted his marriage and, his relationship with his former spouse. So it's just all about being able to lean in and kind of, the people have to accept the idea that they can take a leadership role and be that hero, within their family.
So in all of these roles that you have in your life, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone sees you in a different light, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? I am somebody that is really, right now I'm leaning into this whole idea of purpose and making a difference with people. I think that's always been sort of an underlying calling for me. And I feel like who I am is this trying to set that example. And again, as we mentioned, being the hero, if you will, taking a stand for the power that love can have within families. And, that feels really true to my core. I mentioned those 2 fundamental beliefs just a little bit ago, the idea of being seen for who you are and loved unconditionally and being lifted up and empowered to be your absolute best. I mean, that's just at my core, who I am, and trying to be able to impact other people that way and trying to have that for myself as well and see myself that way. So that's at the root of, I would say, of who I am.
So if anyone out there, Jim, wants to learn more about you, your services, anything pertaining to your life and world, where can they go?
So my practice is called Family Enrichment Academy. And so the website's familyenrichmentacademy.com. So they can jump there. And, there's obviously a contact me page there with an email address, but that's the best way to connect. I have a YouTube channel as well. Everything's under Family Enrichment Academy, but they can go there. I do blog posts, content on a regular basis, and I would encourage people to, check it out. On my homepage, I do have a free resource for parents with teenagers. You mentioned you have teenagers. You might like this as well. The resource is, it's 10 questions you should never ask your teenager. The premise is they're like conversation killers. And then I have 10 great questions, the conversation starters. And it's in response to one of the common things I hear from parents is their teenagers won't open up and talk to them. And so it's a free resource. It's available right on the homepage of the website that people can download that as well. So just invite people to connect, and hopefully my message and information speaks to them, and as I said earlier, can have an impact, bring a little hope, and maybe bring some strategies to them that can make a difference within their families.
Oh man, it's been great, Jim. Thank you for opening up. Thanks for sharing your story with my audience. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.